Good evening, Aussies and Kiwis. Yes, Victoria is out of lockdown. No, I haven't yet had a haircut. I'll get that sorted. I'm joined here today by veteran H, who has managed to get a haircut and is making me look rather dishevelled. Welcome, H. Thanks for coming, mate. Looking rather dapper.
I thought I'd even put a shirt on.
Oh, well done. Well done. I try to keep it fairly informal. You know, we're just regular everyday people here on the group, so we try to keep it fairly informal, just a casual chat, really, mate. But I've got to say, your background, wow, 24 years in the ADF, 3 times decorated for conspicuous service and valour, amongst many other decorations, I'm sure. You've seen Somalia, Malaysia, Timor, Afghanistan. I could talk to you for hours, but what we're going to try and do tonight, I'd love for you to come back on and talk more about your experiences. What we're going to do tonight is just do a little bit on your background. I'm really keen to talk to you about mental health, transitioning back into civilian life, trauma, you know, all of that sort of stuff. But, you know, we want to get to know you a bit as well. The main reason I want to talk to you about that stuff is other than the fact that it's bloody important and, you know, something that we know is many veterans are afflicted by. We're in the process of supporting and sponsoring a forum next year through Tony Dell at Stand Tall for PTS, and there's a lot of news coming in the next few weeks about that. But this is kind of, I guess, a lead into those discussions that we're going to be having over the coming months before that forum takes place. And I thought, what a great way to start, talking with somebody who has spent so much time and in such a varied career in the service, and then has returned to, you know, normal life or civilian life. And, you know, what your experience has been. So, yeah, mate, if I ask questions that are sensitive, either personally or security-wise, just tell me to move on. We'll try and keep it to about 30 minutes, and I won't do most of the talking. I'm just going to sort of guide you along the way so that we cover the topics and we don't go too long, if that's cool.
100%.
Magnificent. We'll leave some time at the end for questions from the audience there as well. So if you've got any questions for H, pop them in the comments field, and we'll get to them at the end or as we go along. So, mate, I've listened to a few podcasts and I've done a bit of homework on your story, but I don't want to tell it. I was really fascinated by your early, I think you called it obsession, or, you know, the way you gravitated towards or that fascination with military service, the stories of your childhood classrooms with your ruler. Can you tell everybody a bit about those early days?
Yeah, definitely. So as I've said before, I literally cannot remember a time or a stage in my early life where I wasn't joining the army. You know, I was, there's probably no other word, you know, that fits it better than obsessed with it. And fixated on, you know, that's what I was going to do. And in particularly also right from an early age, I was fixated on joining the Special Forces. So, you know, I had no one in my immediate family. You know, my mother and father separated when I was quite young. But there's, you know, my father or my stepfather or my mother or stepmother, you know what I mean? There was no one in the family. My grandfather served. But yeah, that was it. So I'm not sure where it come from, but it was definitely alive and well.
Definitely a part of your DNA, so to speak, even though there's no real link. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
So I was living in Bundaberg at the time, and I thought what I'll do is exactly that, is I'll join as a mechanic. I actually had a friend in Bundaberg who's a friend of a friend's who I'd gotten to know, and he joined the army as a mechanic, and then he went to SASR. They were the only unit around then, as in, correction, one Commando Regiment was always there, but you get the point. So I do remember sort of, you know, listening to some of his stories because he went to SASR originally, not as an operator, and then did selection. So I think I got a little bit of inspiration from him. But like I said, the point was already made in my head. But that's where I got the idea about, you know what, I'll join as a mechanic now. And he sort of suggested that, like, if this is what you really want to do. And you can get a grasp on that as to how early I was having these quite mature and in-depth planning conversations with people. I would have been talking to him when I was 14 or so years old about, what the strategy was. So, yeah, I only sort of just realised that just then. It's a bit funny.
Yeah, unheard of nowadays in a lot of ways, isn't it? So, I remember, God, when I was that age, I think I just wanted to
tip of my go can. Sorry.
Have a go. That's the one. Have a go. I think when I was that age, I was just I was more interested in finishing school and having a girlfriend and things like that. There was certainly no in-depth strategy for the foreseeable future when I was 14, 15. Hats off to you, mate.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit unnatural, I guess.
You actually entered the ADF at 17, didn't you? And then started your training. Yeah.
So I left home, and there was nothing specifically going on there, but I just wanted to get out of town for a little while. Essentially, I was in Bundaberg, and I'd applied, and I can't remember the feedback, because getting feedback around then was it's not as fast as it is now with emails and texts and all the other media access we have. So I went up near Longreach and worked on a property up there as a rouseabout, and then I think I was up there about a month or two, maybe a bit long, about 2 months or so. Anyway, and then they called me. Well, there was a message. I can't even remember how I got the message, because the property had one phone and the phone line was down. I think a neighbouring station or something got some message, or it wasn't quite a telegram back there. It wasn't World War II, but it wasn't far from it. But I got a convoluted to get back to Brisbane, like literally, ASAP, to sign the line. And I drove. I was had an old Series 2 1965 ex-Army, ironically, military Land Rover. So I drove that back. No air conditioning, all the way from Longreach. It was a bit of an adventure, sitting on 70 k's an hour or something. Turned into like a 2.5 day trip, I think.
Keen as mustard. Wow. And I don't want to get into spend forever talking about your history, and I'm sure you've told the story so many times, but it fascinates me. I especially loved, besides the story of you with your ruler, ducking under desks in classrooms, but when you first started at Kapuka and you're asked to write down your top 3 options for your career path, what did you write down?
Yeah, I did write down infantry, and then I got summoned, and I can remember it like quite clearly. I got summoned to come up to, they have the really long hallways. Anyone who's listening who's been there would understand, but for others, you've just got a single very side of a divider. So whenever they say, hallway, whatever platoon, everyone has to run out to the edge of that door and line up. And we'd put that paperwork in, gone through that process only that afternoon. And a couple of us had made what was considered mistakes. Mine obviously wasn't a mistake, but for the others it was a mistake. And you know what they're like, and just making a point of when you're given instructions and all that. So they made a point of getting us all out there, told everyone there what the issue was, and then with me, they're like, and you can come up to the office, and back then they used to like be fairly in your face and aggressive. I went up there, I was kind of wondering what happened. I knew what I'd done, and they told us not to do that, but I thought, anyway, they told me to fix it, and I wrote it on there again, and then they gave me some threat, and I was just like, I think they're just too frustrated, and I literally don't think they knew what to do. So they just told me to go back to my room. And surprise, I was posted infantry.
Oh. And from there, you went to Townsville, and
a beautiful Townsville. Though it was a lot of focus back in that time about this is the early 90s. They were the ODFs, and then they changed, I think, to the RDF. So ODF were the Operation Deployment Force, which was 2 brigade identities, mainly formed around 1 RAR and what was then 2-4 RAR, and then they would just cut other pieces. We weren't into task forces back then. That sort of hadn't evolved yet. But I was very, very happy that I got 1 RAR. That's what I asked to get, and that's what I got. And it was good soldiering back then, As in, it's just, yeah, I can remember quite enjoying it.
And it's interesting that you use the term good soldiering there, because I've heard you use that term a few times. What word would you describe to use to describe the term good soldiering? You know, I would imagine morale and camaraderie and trust and things like that come to my mind. But what would you use to describe that?
That's a good question, Jay. I would say, to me, first of all, is when you feel happy and content in the job, that you're doing what you're there to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and then from that flows down. So good soldering, then, you know, we're doing, you know, good exercises, we're doing good training. You've got good NCOs and officers looking after you. You know, you've got good equipment. You know what your mission is. You know, you're in a good team, and all those things. So you're soldering, because it sort of encapsulates in my mind that entire experience. So, you know, if the soldering is good, it's like whether it be on counter-terrorism team, I'll be like, that stuff is always good, but then every now and then you'd be like, fuck, that was an absolute dream team. Because just everything over a period of time would be, almost perfect in regards to, what you were doing, who you were with, the activities or operations, the exercise, just everything. So it was just, and also, I was so green, when you look back at it, you finished Kapuka and I thought, I'm a super soldier already. And then I finished Singleton and I'm like, shit, now I'm a real super soldier. Then I go to 1RR and you kind of get sort of put back in your place a little bit in a good way.
I was going to touch on I was going to touch on that. I'd imagine that kind of like when you first finished high school and you go out there thinking, right now I'm going to be, CEO of a Fortune 500 company and you get your first job and realise that school didn't prepare you at all. That in that pond you were a big fish and you knew everything there was to know, but now you're a tiny little fish in a whole new pond. And in the civilian world, you can afford to flounder a little bit and to pivot on the spot and take your time to make a decision. Yeah. But in the service, there you really can't afford to do that, can you?
That's right. And in particular back then, I don't describe errors as in I did it tougher during this time, right? Things just change. We've gone through evolutions, we've gone through revolutions. Mm-hmm. So. But back then, like anyone who was from that era knows, like it was, as much as it was good soldering, like, it was not uncommon that if you, made like a fairly severe mistake, how that mistake was reminded to you, was different to how it might be reminded now. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, because at times I saw things, that. Quite frankly, were excessive or abusive or any of those sort of natures. But you get the point. Is it's just like some of us when we were growing up. If you did something wrong, you might get a clip around the back of the head. Other people call that child abuse. I think children should be disciplined. It's pretty easy to delineate the two, and I think back then just the discipline was certainly a lot more present. We didn't have to contend with, the distractions that soldiers and NCOs or other commanders need to contend with now. That are soldiers on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, and everything, and TikTok, and all these other things. That the governance is so much more now. That the just all those things, just a myriad of things that are overlaid on top of them now. And for that, I actually, empathise with them, the fact that they need to soldier. It's like kids, they need to grow up in this world. They need to soldier with those things. So, long explanation, but you get the point.
You've spoken a lot about how you sort of thrived, especially in those early years, thrived on that discipline and that brotherhood and the structure and routine and regiment, if you like, of being in the armed service and so forth. Is that something that you continued to thrive on, or did you go away a little bit over time? Or
You know, I'm definitely the personality type that I'll put it to you this way. I'll skip forward to my last operation,
Sure.
as in my last deployment. Sorry. So because this kind of sums it all up a little bit. There was well, he just got promoted to a 1-star general, so he's a 1-star there, an Australian. I won't mention his name, but Australian Special Forces officer, who's a good friend of mine, and definitely one of our absolute best. And we were humming and hawing whether I'd stay on to do a second tour, as in back to back. So I'd already been there 6 months. Came up, and it was going to be fairly intense in regards to, it was a startup of a capability to do some special police units and stuff in and around Kabul. And we had a good discussion about it. And I was with a 2-2 SAS colonel, who was my counterpart. I was the senior enlisted guy. He was the boss. Just standard as RSM-CO relationship. And he said, "Well, H," he said, "I know how well you work under pressure. And you do your best work under pressure. You do your best work, when you're in these circumstances." And that was the end of the chat. He just kind of nodded at me, and I just went, kind of acknowledged it. And I was tired, but he's dead right. So, that discipline, mate, that routine. Again, I don't apologise to anyone. I really don't give short answers.
That's okay.
But, I think, the detail behind everything to me nowadays is just so important, the perspective. And, I thrive, and I think this is a common thing, and where a lot of us, possibly go wrong, for the listeners, myself and Joe were talking before we went live about transition and a few things. And, when people slip out, certainly for me, and when I fall out of routine, when I don't have these things, when I don't have a challenge, when I don't have, I'm literally get a little bit lost, and then I can get a little bit idle mind, and then I can go either one or two ways, and that can happen sort of fairly quickly. And I think that's fairly common. It's certainly common with high performance individuals and others of that type.
And that's a really great segue, if you like, for us to start moving into this conversation around trauma and transition, because you coming out of the military, coming out of any role where you've seen combat or you've experienced, the extremes of life or of service, coming back into the civilian world where things are a little bit more boring, you don't have enemies at you're not having to scan for them everywhere, and obviously life can be a little bit more boring. There's still routine there, but it's the routine of putting out your rubbish and going to the gym, going to work, whatever it is that you happen to do. How did you find, especially in those early years of first leaving, how did you find that transition, and what did you do, or what helped you to make it easier on yourself?
Yeah, again, Jay, a really, really good question, and one that I could probably talk literally hours on.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So what did I do personally? So my transition, was quite difficult in some areas and quite easy in others. Now, it was difficult on the fact, and I won't go into this a lot, but I will talk to it briefly because it should be acknowledged. I didn't acknowledge that I was not in the best frame of mind. I made some really bad decisions with my relationships. At the time, I was married, had an absolute beautiful family and a beautiful wife. And then I decided after a 13-month deployment to leave them. And there was clearly, without going into some detail, some things happening prior to that. And there was a third party involved in some other things. So that component, we'll just park that for a moment. In regards to the professional side of leaving, I, with the risk of sounding arrogant, because I don't mean it to come from that perspective, or don't want it to sound like, I'd achieved, frankly, I'd fucking done a lot. And I'd acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was quite comfortable with that. And a position, where it'd be least likely to deploy or be less around, the teams or the companies or not in the unit. And basically what I mean by that is by the time I come back, there was just literally, I'd milked everything I possibly could from my time in the unit, and I had to go to Canberra. And I didn't want to go to Canberra. There was a couple other things that happened that year which didn't sit well with me. So on that note, it was quite, I had a bit of a distaste in my mouth about a few things. So now I'm out. So we'll just fast forward a little bit to give you an idea of how busy we were, how busy I was, and a lot of this was my own doing. So I'm not pointing a finger at anyone. I had basically, after I got paid out all of my long service leave, so a full 6 months long, or 7.5, 8 months, whatever it was, long service leave, I still had enough leave to take a year off.
Oh, wow.
That's days in the book paid.
Wow.
So I left the unit in February 2014. I technically discharged December the same year. So that whole year, I was on full pay and could do whatever I want. Gotcha. And was experiencing some things that I'd never experienced before. So coming back to a couple of points you made about transitioning, and that's where my transition, started to, get rocky. And then, it was, things would be going okay and then would simply get worse. So what I mean by that is I noticed there's a sort of a common theme, and a lot of people get out. It really depends who they're around. And I'd love to come back on, Jay, and just talk probably 30 minutes just on this another night, mate. But it's really, really dependent on who they're around and what support mechanism they have. And it's not just, the bros or sisters. For some reason, not for some reason, they're relatively obvious, but a lot of guys have separated from their families.
Mm-hmm.
So when you sort of, you're really alone, if that makes sense. And you're in a position where there's no one really accounting maybe for first time in your life, first time in 8 years, first time in 15 years, first time whatever. There's no one accounting for, your actions and what you may or may not be doing. Mm-hmm. And then, what happens, and then that just flows in with then some of the other feelings and emotions and stuff you're experiencing. And maybe on or around the same time you get a large payout, whether that's from, accumulated days, and when you get your last, they backdate all your, your allowances and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is when, a lot of people go down the wrong path with different coping mechanisms, different substances, different crowds and different people. So they're looking for something that, to fix that hole, that void. And I think that's our most dangerous time, and that's why it's something near and dear to my heart. That the whole transition piece is where we need more systems in place. We really need, to be looking after our people more once they leave, because the way the military works, a little bit of a slide on them, like a little bit of a punt at them, but basically once you're out, you're out. You're not their responsibility. So whose responsibility are you? You're your own. Why are there all these veterans organisations? Because they know this is the period they're trying to pick it up. It's not DVA's responsibility. It's DVA's responsibility to, process claims. It's your responsibility to put them in. It's your responsibility to get your life on track. And we have got a lot of, very, very good veterans organisations out there, and a lot of old ones that are realising that they were falling short and need to do a lot more. We've got the old ones like Legacy and the RSLs, the new ones like Mates for Mates, Soldier On. Young Veterans, is an excellent organisation. So there's plenty of things out there, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that space.
And I'm glad you said that because I completely agree. I think there's a lot of work to be done overall for all cohorts, but particularly in the veteran cohort. We know that in Australia, you're 10 times more likely as a veteran to have ideation about suicide and to take your own life than a civilian person. The deaths amongst ex-serving personnel are much greater than the deaths in combat. I mean, I don't want to bag out the government or anything like that, but it is a slight on our government, on our policy, and on our systems, and that a lot needs to change. But you know what? There are a lot of really good people trying to make things happen.
Yeah, no, one thing. You're right, mate. It's a horrible statistics, and I know you're not bagging out the government. I mean, people who just point fingers at people, we need to help provide the solution. The problem with this, the solution's quite difficult. So, I'll be honest, I didn't really understand suicide. I was, one of those persons that, and this is going back many years, not now, who would look at it as, like, what the fuck's wrong with him? Or, that's the weak way out or whatever. And then, years later, after, your brain chemicals and stuff have been altered due to other substances and things, and you're in these depressive states, I can remember sitting there, and I've never actually tried to kill myself. But like you said, the ideology or the idealization of it becomes real. And it wasn't until then I understood it. And what I mean by that is what other people I think don't understand is you feel there is so much pressure on you or so much noise on you. There's so much darkness on you. It's so cloudy. It's so heavy. These are the expressions that you'll hear people use and that I've experienced. And you do feel alone, because what people don't understand about depressive states is you can call me 100 fucking times. I'm not going to pick up that phone.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pick it up. I know I need to eat some healthy food, go out in the sunshine, or go to my treatment or do this. I'm not going to do it. You can't do it. You're incapacitated. You're immobilized.
Correct.
So coming back to, the problem and the solution, and that's where it's hard and it's complicated, because I don't like to rant on something unless we can provide solutions. And what I've always said and said now for years, the key to the solution is it needs to be a proactive system, and we're not there yet. So people are there, organizations are there, and some mindsets are there. But
policies.
Yeah, where are we? I mean, the fact the government doesn't officially track veteran suicide, like there's no official acknowledgement of that. That
crazy.
kind of says on its own, because it's like, they need to be doing at least that step one and go, hey, they know there's a problem. There's inquiries, there's inquests, there's fucking a realm of things happening, and they give lots of grants out to all these organizations to help. But like I said, it really requires, a lot of proactive intuition to realize what's happening with just one individual to get to an intervention state or, whatever. So
you are absolutely right, H. And, the complexity is everyone's individual, everybody's different. So, that adds a layer of complexity that is unlike anything else, not to draw a comparison, but if you've got cancer of the liver or something, then you'll find that there's some commonality amongst every liver cancer sufferer. But there's not as much commonality amongst those that may be suffering from depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress, or any of the other myriad of some of the symptoms may be the same, but the experiences aren't necessarily. So, look, I don't want to hijack our conversation, and I don't want to keep you here all night, but next March, Tony Dell, who I mentioned before, who founded Stand Tall for PTS, he was in Vietnam. He is an ex-cricket player, and he has been tirelessly working toward trying to form solutions and influence government in exactly what it is we've just been talking about. we're supporting a forum next year. In the comments here, he hasn't signed up to StreamYard, but one of the first chats is, Jay, can we line H up for the forum PTS 21? Where do you live? I think that
I'll do it if I can, mate. If I'm around and available, I'll be more than happy to support it. 100%. You got it on record.
Magnificent. Well, we'll talk further about exactly how we can do that. But it's a one-day event where the plan is to bring together all of the people, and especially those with lived experience and who can add value beyond just an academic or position of power as a chairperson or a president of an organisation or something, to actually come up with actions. So it's not a talk fest, it's not a conference, it's an action working group to then lobby government essentially and say, do this. And we've got 250,000 people on this group, so we plan to support that and get a lot of both ex-serving and civilian support behind it. So, that's all I'll say for now. I'm so glad that you're happy to be involved. But let's come back to you, not not the solutions that we hope that we can provide later on. But I guess I brought it up because A, the invitation, and B, I want you to know that there are people working towards trying to come up with those solutions, and especially keeping in mind the complexity and the flexibility that would be required with intentional peer support models and trauma-informed care models and things like that.
Yeah, excellent, mate.
Yeah. So, mate, look, I'm going to suggest that maybe we start to bring it to a little bit of a close, and because otherwise we're going to sit here all night. But I would love to get you back again before next Remembrance Day, so within the next couple of weeks, if you're up for it.
100%, mate.
Yep, magnificent. And I guess, like moving towards that day of Remembrance Day, if I can ask you, before I give a couple of shameless plugs for you, if I can ask you, what is it that Remembrance Day actually means to you now compared to what it meant to you when you were a kid before you entered? Like as a kid in primary school, we shut up for a minute because the teacher tells us to.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to you now?
I think, well, first of all, it means a lot more, even though the day hasn't changed. I think what changes is, our emotional, connection to the day. I think previously the day, and I say this with the utmost sincerity and respect, it was. Well, I mean, these conflicts weren't there, but then even after some recent conflicts, and this was for Anzac Day as well, we just seem to be having such a large focus on earlier conflicts. So what's really important for me, and on these days, is remembering of how much and what we've achieved. Excuse me, as a modern defence force, and how much and what we've done. I mean, I don't go on about Afghanistan because it was my war. It sounds very sort of biased and, monocular, but, it was an extremely long, complex campaign, and that was just so unique to anywhere else or anything else we'd ever fought in. So on Remembrance Day, first and foremost, I think of all my direct friends, brothers from different countries that are no longer with us, who are closest to me. Then I think sort of that next onion out of all the veterans recently that we've lost. Then I think back and am fascinated by some of the decisions and just the downright, almost negligent attrition warfare. With the number of casualties just so high. And I just try and fathom that. When we get 2 people killed, it's like, oh my God, can you imagine being in that thing? And the 2 other biggest things I think of is, and one of them might seem a bit funny, but I think what this country would be like if those earlier wars didn't happen. we sent when I say our best men, that doesn't mean that there was no best men left in Australia. So don't take that out of context. Hopefully you know what I mean by that. We sent, some of our, or most of our, let's put it that way, absolute best men. And most of them, were, from rural families and whatnot. And we sent them across to war, and a lot of them didn't come home. So we were like, when we became so multicultural, and again, I'm not racist. I'm not implying anything like that. I just am curious as to how Australia would be now, because one thing I know, it would be a completely different demographic. And that just sort of fascinates and interests me. And then the last thing that I always think about and ponder and whatnot is of who's overseas right now and where are they serving, what are they feeling and experiencing, what are their families going through, when did they last contact them, and on the same token, for which I do more so when I'm talking about the closer people who have lost, I always think or make a connection with them. I call them on the day, the widows and other the extended family members of people who mates who have passed, and just check in with them. So, I try not to get too sort of emotional in those days anymore. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It's kind of weird. It's either all one way or the other. I'm either sort of numb about it all, or I get sort of quite emotional. But there's some of the things that go through my head on the 11th of the 11th.
1 or 2 minutes doesn't really seem adequate in a lot of ways, does it, for the rest of us?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. Mate, I can't thank you enough for being so candid, so just open and transparent about your experiences and your thoughts and feelings. I know you've shown a lot of bravery in your service and in your 24 years, but you've shown also a lot of bravery in coming on and speaking to everybody so openly today. So from me, thank you. I can see the comments are like scrolling away, so I'm going to jump in there quickly and have a look what we have in terms of questions. So that's your call, guys. If you want to put questions into it now, we've got a lot of thank yous, a lot of messages of support and gratitude. A comment here about that's sad and infuriating is that you go to fight and you're forgotten about by our so-called government.
I can make a quick comment if you want. I can see where you're popping those up. I'm happy to make quick comments, Jay. Yeah, look, it is sad. I won't go into a lot of detail about it. Like the last few days, I'll be honest, have been a bit rough. I woke up one morning, we were on the front page of almost every national newspaper. There's a lot of inquiries on at the moment. There's a lot of things happening. The media, that they literally will just write whatever they want. Some of them have been good, some of them have been bad. But I'm saying this now to the veteran community out there. All we can do, because it's all we have, is stick by each other, keep checking in. People that are getting frustrated. Like we've had people before this inquiry comes out have already killed themselves as a result of possibilities. So that's the severity of it. It is serious business. And the other thing that I would just finish on that note on is, some of the stuff they're writing is, but it's taken out of context and perspective. War is war. And there's a lot of unpleasant things that happen. And you are also put in positions, especially in actual combat, where you don't have time to make a decision. You have a reflex. That's how fast. So
that was some of the questions that I had for you.
But it's like I said. Sorry, Joe, you go.
I was going to say that was some of the questions that I had for you earlier, but we didn't get into, how much of it's muscle memory and training and instinct and how much of it is actually conscious when you're in the heart of it, when you're in the guts of combat. I'd imagine a lot of it is reflex. You think about it afterwards, and that's where some of the things that we've talked about, like survivor's guilt and whatnot, and I know we didn't really touch on it in the live here, but some of those things that you've touched on before, and we've spoken about briefly prior to going live. We need to talk more about those things. They need to be commonplace conversations, and we need to seek to understand better exactly what that means and how to help people that are feeling that.
Definitely.
You've got a lot of comments of support. There is a question here from Angela Patterson. How can people become resilient? How can we build more resilience?
Very good question, Angela. Building. So this is a hard one, but I'll give it a crack. So we're all born with certain levels. Actually, I'll use the pencil. So that's one unit. Actually, I'll put this. That's one unit as a whole. Okay, and for example, you might be born, and it doesn't mean you're any less a person, with this much resilience. I might be born with this much resilience, and another person has this much. We'll just keep it pretty simple. So when a soldier, and this is not going to be a short answer. So when a soldier joins the army as a basic soldier, he'll go through Kapuka, and there'll be some resilience tests, as in, can you put this heavy pack on and walk 10 kilometers? It hurts my shoulders. I want to take it off. Doesn't have much resilience. He's resilience of it down here. Doesn't mean he's a bad person. Doesn't mean he can't do 1,000 other things in society. It means he's not suitable for this job. Mm-hmm. So when you get a special forces guy, we focus and literally, test to the micro nth degree. Their level of resilience needs to be here. And what that means, or one way to describe it is, that they can just handle more and more and more. And then if you were to turn that upside down without confusing you, if you use the bucket analogy, that bucket's going to be able to take more until it's full. Everybody has a limit. It's like if you, not that we interrogate people, but if you were, or you've seen movies where there's interrogation, they'll go, everyone's got a breaking point. It just matter what it is. I might have to talk to you for 5 minutes. I might have to do some, other, painful things or whatever. You get the point. So building resilience in life, I think we can do by understanding our emotional intellect. I have a saying that vulnerability is the new tough. Mm-hmm. I think when you let things out more and get them off your chest, you actually, even crying, you actually are building more resilience with yourself because it's now gone, and you feel, when people have a good cry, and I was doing a lot of work last week as some volunteers, and a couple of them would get very, very emotionally worked up over things. And we were dealing with some, quite horrific things, and they're not trained to do that. As in, talking to people who may have spent, years in a Nazi war camp or something, it's quite, and you're hearing these stories, and they would come back to camp and they'd be quite upset. And so I'd see that, I'd pull them aside, and you could see them just not letting go. And I'd encourage them and talk to them to let go. And then after they'd cry, they were like, I feel better now. So, like I said, it's not a short answer. So I think one way we can build resilience in ourselves is by being a lot more emotionally in touch with ourselves and learning what to let go and what not to. And the other way of how, through professional counseling, through spiritual guidance, through meditation, whatever works for you, if not all of the above, on techniques, strategies, etc., on how to deal with things. So, for example, when I come angry now, what I do now as opposed to what I used to do, which might be punch a hole in the wall or something stupid, that's not resilience. That's just being stupid. So, and then I guess, and just to finish, because like I said, it is a hard, complex question. I think also putting yourself in positions of controlled duress, whether that's, like, for example, one thing would be, hard physical training. So it's building your tolerance levels up. There's some evidence about hyperbaric changes. Sorry, I've just lost the word. The cold work, like the ice baths. There's a word for it. I apologize, I've lost it. But
hypothermic.
Say again, Joe.
Hypothermic.
Yeah, so doing that sort of level of training, so anything that puts your body into a shock state where you need to talk through it and relax it, um, like extreme physical training, things like that. So they'll certainly help. And then, like I said earlier, being more aware and doing the spiritual stuff, I think that certainly, will aid in building some self-resilience.
One of my just further to that question, one of the favourite things that I saw maybe a couple of years ago really resonated with me. Found it on YouTube. It's about a minute long, 90 seconds, and I believe the title was "How Lobsters Grow." So if you want to go YouTube searching that, it's
I haven't heard
like
that
a
one.
Jewish rabbi or something, and he tells this great story about. And I don't want to give spoiler alerts, but you know what, bugger it, I'm going to. He talks about how lobsters grow in nature, and that they have an external skeleton, an exoskeleton, and as they grow internally, that skeleton starts to become restrictive and tight and uncomfortable. So they crawl under a rock or a rock formation, and they shake off that shell, and they're vulnerable. They're vulnerable to other predators, so they stay away and they build a new shell that's more comfortable, and the cycle repeats over life. And that as humans, what we tend to do is not experience, like we don't go under the shell and grow. We take some medication, or we run away from the problem in some way, rather than actually protecting ourselves from predators and allowing ourselves to grow and nurturing ourselves during those vulnerable times.
Yeah,
and I think your emotional intelligence comment. Yeah.
I love analogies, mate, and I love hearing one I haven't heard before, and I'll certainly be using that one. So thanks.
Yeah, well, you'll find it on YouTube. He does it much better than I do. But we don't have any. One more comment, actually. One more question. Lots of comments. So go and read those afterwards. One last question, then we will wrap it up because we're sort of we're approaching an hour, I think. How do you switch off your mind and compartmentalize things? A good one too, isn't it? These are loaded questions.
No, I'm liking the questions. They're good. I like to be challenged a bit. How do I switch off my mind? I mean, you have to ask some people who have lived with me or worked with me. That like sometimes, honestly, I do struggle with that. But in the good side, as in, for example, last week when I was mission commander of an activity for an organisation, a veterans organisation that helps people out. I had a lot of things going on, and once I'm in that mode, and I'll be honest with you, like the only way I can go to sleep of a night time is on prescribed medication when I'm in that mode. Like I can sleep fine now when I'm there. Like once I'm spinning, I can't. As in, I don't have the time to do what I need to do to wind down because I'm working till late, and I'd get up at 4 o'clock and train. So to be then ready to go at 5. So under that environment, and also like often when I was serving, I'd have to take a sleeping tablet. I cannot switch off. I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying that's what you've asked the question. Under
if that's what you described, then what's suitable for you?
That's what I would do. In a normal environment, I now will use meditation. I'm a big fan of the Calm app, which is extremely recommended with a lot of counsellors, psychiatrists, and other people. So that's Calm, as in CALM. I don't own the app. I'm not plugging it. But a lot of people use that. It has, and it sounds funny, but it has sleep stories. It has meditation. It has breathing. It just has a bunch of stuff on there. Really simple to use in all different time frames. So you could come out of the office and your boss has just said something, and you're starting to hyperventilate, or you're getting whatever sensation you're feeling. You're not. Your body is reacting to something that has been told to you or done to you, or an email you've read, or an action, or you're about to play a football game, whatever it is. And you might have like 3 minutes to get your shit sorted. You go on there and just press 3 minutes, and I swear to God, it'll get you down some serious levels.
I just found the website for it now, actually, so I might actually look at that myself.
It's brilliant. And the other thing I do, I think I mentioned it, is meditate, which is part of that. Training, if I don't train, that'll affect my sleep and my ability to switch off. in regards to the second part of the question about compartmentalization, it's an excellent question. I don't want to palm it off. I'll try and write or post something on it later through Jay. I'm actually very good at it.
Well, maybe with the next conversation we can dedicate some time to that on our next chat.
Yeah. But compartmentalization is extremely important. It allows you to put a traumatic event. People use the word shelf or drawer or box, but it allows you to put something into that and shut the lid, literally, so you can focus on what you're doing. So my ability to compartmentalization probably got too good. And there's another whole facet to that, and that's what I want to talk about, because if you're compartmentalizing everything and you never open up or deal with what's in that box, then one fucking day you wake up and all your boxes pop open.
And they're like Jack in the Boxes, and you've got major problems. Yeah.
There's two sides to that coin.
Yeah. So just before we go, a couple of quick things that I want to share with the audience. You're very much aware of these because they are you. I'm just going to share my screen with everybody very quickly. So just touching on the car map. Oh, there we go. So calm.com. This is where you can find the app, the car map, calm.com. Let me turn the banner off here. There we go. So you can see the full window. Secondly is your Instagram, 7.horses.co. I meant to have a scrolling banner for that, and I apologise for not putting it up there, H. But I will make sure it's in the comments as well. So 7.horses.co. Follow H on Instagram. He is going to be back, though. And check out Tactical Recovery. There's some really cool stuff in there. Lastly, if you want to hear some more from H, there is a great series of podcasts, volume 1 to 5, on Life on the Line podcast. It's lifeonthelinepodcast.com, where you can hear quite a number of different stories that you've got and experiences that you've had and so forth. Hey.
Yeah, it's a great podcast, which I'm a huge fan of and supporter of. Alex Lloyd, who runs it, has become a very good friend of mine. We talk often about all sorts of little things. But yeah, it's that podcast is not about me in any way, shape, or form. That podcast is about veteran stories that have never been told before, people that may not write books. And the other thing which I absolutely love about it and encourage people to tune into it, and please make comments and rate it, because this is what keeps these podcasts going, is the diversity. So, it's not just, hey, you'll hear me I did some crazy stuff in Afghanistan, but you'll also hear about, like a female pilot or, a Navy captain of a ship. So just the diversity in there is absolutely incredible, and it's an absolute credit to the couple of people behind it.
I've heard everyone, so and I listen to them across a variety of different topics, but really good interviewer, really thorough, and he's actually enjoyable to listen to. So check out Life on the Line podcast.com. I'll put these in the comments as well after the conversation. 7horses.co on Instagram, and the car map, highly recommended by our resident veteran H. So H, mate, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. I'm going to stop sharing my screen altogether now. I think we've had a few more comments pop in, but John's popped in the podcast for us. Lots of love, lots of thank yous, and mate, we'll have a chat offline about when we can get together next and talk more.
Definitely. Again, thanks so much, Dave, for what you said, mate. I really, really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing. The way I look at things is, I'll do anything I can if it just helps one person. So if something I said tonight helps one person, live some sort of better quality of life or change something that they're doing in their life, then I think we've achieved our mission.
Same. Good on you, mate. Good on you.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
See you later, mate.
Bye, everybody.